Large cappuccino. Orders up.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Athlete Cafe. We just have Michael and I here today, so we're going to hold it down for a couple good episodes. But yeah, things are going well around the office right now. I think everybody's enjoying the nice weather. Things are...
Spring is back.
It's here. The sun's shining.
Yeah.
It's getting warmer, and I think everybody's mood is just lifting instantly with it. I don't know about you.
Yeah. The clocks have sprung ahead, and so have our moods.
Yeah,
which
that's
is very
for sure.
helpful because otherwise I think there'd be a lot more possible crankiness. And I don't know, one of the cool things that I've seen, at least because I do with my athletes, like we'll make Spotify playlists if they do a certain amount of sport related. We're not just out there just making random things. Like they'll use it for workouts or after wins or to help them relax before a game. But it's been cool to see wintertime, the playlists a little sad.
The winter blues hit hard this year, I think, for everybody. There were some sad vibes going around.
Yeah, a lot of negativity out there, and a lot of sad Coldplay on these playlists. Fix You, The Scientist.
Yeah.
We got to get to Paradise and the other
the fun Coldplay.
Fun Coldplay, which we're starting to get to. So you can see with the weather improving, moods improving, spring sports are here.
Yes. Yeah.
Winter sports are over with.
Yeah. It's that weird transition period, I think, right now, but just everything's kind of falling into place, fresh start.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's an exciting time of the year.
Yeah, I already have, and it's weird regionally because I have baseball kids that are about to start their seasons this week. I have a couple of baseball kids that are halfway through their season already.
Yeah, and then some people are on spring break. I don't know.
Spring breaks in the Northeast, where I'm back home, where in Rhode Island originally from. We had February and April. It wasn't March. People, it's wild. It's wonky.
Yeah, there's a lot going on. But all good stuff. I think good changes, fresh starts. Yeah, it's a fun time of year.
Yeah.
Cool.
But I know our big topic today.
Yeah, is, I guess on the note of things going well, obviously things aren't always going to be what we want them to be. So today our plan was to jump into just some negative thoughts and negative pressure, just some of the tougher thoughts that we might have going through games, prepping for games, and just that pressure that we put on ourselves as athletes. So I think we're going to walk through kind of maybe where that comes from, how we can deal with it, how we can reframe it, and just make sure that we're using our thoughts and our mindset to help us perform instead of something that can hold us back or have more of a negative impact on us. So.
Yeah, we're going to try to keep the conversation. It probably won't, but we're going to try to keep it based on and grounded in self-talk for sports, but we'll probably go like we normally do, all around, touching on a bunch of different topics and hopefully share a couple of examples of, athletes that we see maybe are doing it really well, athletes that maybe, could improve too, so...
Yeah, I think, first of all, when it comes to having these negative thoughts, it's really important to notice or to recognize the fact that our brains are wired this way, right? For so many thousands of years as humans, our brains have been wired to think more negatively in order to save us, in order to help us survive, to thrive, and all of that kind of stuff. So sometimes when athletes are really worked up about the fact that, I'm having all these negative thoughts, why is this happening? It's because our brains are wired that way, right? So it's going to take some time to be able to rewire them, to quiet those thoughts and recognize situations differently than threats, right? Perceiving it differently. I don't know if you've seen that TikTok trend that's going around right now where it's my brain can't tell the difference between being attacked by a bear and calling my doctor's office or just those crazy examples. But
I deleted TikTok.
Oh, I don't have TikTok either. I'm the old school. I see it all on Instagram. But I was trying to sound cool for the podcast.
Trying to sound hip and with it.
Yes, which I have not been feeling like that recently.
You've been struggling with the lingo.
The lingo,
the jargon.
Skip. Yeah, I'm working on it.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point, right? And not only that, but it's our brain's job. I think at the average is around 30,000 thoughts a day is going to spew out of this thing. And you can't really stop it or turn it off until you really go to sleep. And even then, it's still not turned off. No. It's still thinking. It's still going, right? Because otherwise, you wouldn't be here. And that's the whole point of this, right? It's grounded in science. It's grounded in evolution, right? We're hardwired, like you said, negative for survival purposes. You know, we used to have to live amongst the dinosaurs in the Ice Age, and then, you know, ancient Egypt and Rome and medieval times, and survive plagues
Roman
and
Empire.
wars. And now we just got to survive ourselves, right? We just
We
survive
just gotta make it through.
calling the doctor's office,
Yeah.
you know, ordering
Going
food,
up to bat.
going up to bat, right? So it's all these different things, and now we have to try to come up with ways where, how do I kind of attack these negative thoughts? You know, we're not fighting off tigers in the wilderness anymore. We're fighting off the tigers that we're kind of creating up in our heads.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah, thanks. With the
Very nice. But yeah, I think it's just an important thing to realize that these thoughts are going to be there. And we have a bunch of tools, a bunch of strategies that we can use to quiet them, whether it's recognizing and reframing them, whether it's using some breathing strategies to calm down, changing our perspective, changing the way that we're looking at situations. There's a lot of different ways that we can attack it from. So I think we're just going to dive into some of those ways.
Yeah, and at least how we kind of, the cool thing with this topic, right? We're kind of saying it's off that, you know, whole self-talk piece, the internal dialogue with ourselves, and how can we attack our negative thoughts and negative self-talk. But the cool thing with this is I think we both approach it similarly yet different. So how do you kind of go about doing it?
Yeah, I think so. When I start with self-talk with my athletes, that's usually one of the first topics that we cover, just because I think it can be so impactful and just such an easy thing to start recognizing and changing that's going to make a really big impact on our performance. We usually talk about, okay, first of all, what is self-talk, right? It's the thoughts that we're having, that voice inside of our head that drives us in everything that we do, whether it's in the classroom, on the field, in the weight room, anything that we're doing, we're usually thinking through it. So it's starting to be able to recognize that voice and then pick up on the things that it's saying, right? Is it more negative? Is it more positive? Where do we tend to fall and what tends to change it? But one of the strategies that a lot of my athletes have been liking is, instead of feeling like our self-talk can either be negative or positive, there are so many different kinds that we can use. And a lot of the times as athletes, as high performers, and people that have high expectations and want to do well and want to succeed, being super positive all the time doesn't feel real, right? If we're trying to tell ourselves, oh, I'm the best athlete ever, like I'm the best athlete on this field, like nothing's going to stop me, and we're having a really bad day, we're probably not going to believe that. It's not really going to help. So a lot of my athletes have been emphasizing just the more productive or the more like technical self-talk of what is something that's not positive, not negative, but neutral and helpful, right? So whether it's focusing on form, focusing on technique, or something that's just going to allow us to perform without the emotion tied to it.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point. Obviously, you know, because we have to read and study the research like we have, and it says that obviously positivity works, right? It's the best thing out there for you. But to counteract that negative mindset, the negative hardwiring that's up here, to be positive like that, if you're, you know, there are those positive people. You can probably think and name a few of those teammates or people that you have around, right? Like, gosh, how do you always do it, right? But that it wastes and it drains so much energy out of you too. If you're not naturally that positive person, you're trying to work towards that, it's gonna be like, to say all those statements that you're saying, like, I got this, I'm so great, I'm gonna have a great day today, I'm gonna hit this here, do this, right? It's better to just focus on the kind of, like you said, the technical or the kind of instructional kind of self-talk that we do have out there, which is good.
Yeah, just finding that middle ground of something that's actually going to stick with us. Because I think sometimes too, athletes are trying to find that super positive self-talk, and like you said, it's exhausting, but it can also be more frustrating, right? If we're trying to tell ourselves this and then we're like, oh, like I'm not believing it, it's not working, why isn't it working? It's like, it's just because it's not sticking with you right now. So let's find something that sticks, that's going to allow you to do what you need to do.
Yeah, the buy-in isn't there yet. And that's something I always try to like talk about when I talk with athletes. I like to start also with self-talk. I think the way we say things to ourselves really matters. The way we get instruction really matters. And that's usually through words and through kind of action. So I think that's the biggest thing that I'll try to say to athletes. You know, I always try to relate it to that kid in the classroom that's the troublemaker, and you know, he is going off and distracting the class, disrupting the learning, and the teacher says, like, sit down, be quiet, all this stuff, or it'll be like says their name, and then it's like, oh sorry, and they like say it like it's a reflex. Like same thing with positive self-talk. Like you can say it like it's a reflex, like, oh, I'll get it next time, but like, do you actually believe it? Do you actually buy into what you're saying? That's the biggest piece eventually with the self-talk. So you have to have that buy-in. Otherwise, you can just say it like a reflex, and it's just going to kind of brush right off you. It's not going to be meaningful or matter to you.
Yeah.
So kind of a cool little analogy I always like to share with others. Like that kid that might be in your class, or think back to when you're in school and it's like,
You always know, like, you know that one kid.
oh yeah. It's like, yeah, you just would say sorry really fast and not mean it. And you just do it again 2 seconds later. I go, yeah, that's a little bit like positive self-talk at the start. If you don't do it or work towards it or buy into this thing that like this works, it's not going to work at the start.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the way I kind of try to do it is attack it with, or try to rewire the hardwiring up there in our brains, is to kind of reframe the negative thoughts and the negative pressure that we're experiencing and going through. And it's always a little bit different, right? It's straight up negative statements are what are some examples you hear from your athletes?
Why am I even playing?
Yeah.
Why am I out here?
I suck.
I suck.
Can't do this.
Yep.
Yeah.
I'm letting my coaches down, letting my teammates down.
Yeah.
A lot of that stuff.
And then, but negative pressure statements are a little bit different, but similar. It's like, gosh, like it's going to feel amazing if we win today. It's going to be awesome if this or that happens. And while those are good and kind of positive statements, like you could add a lot of unintentional pressure. Or it's like, guys, all we need, you could be down, 5 runs in a baseball game or something, and it's like all we need to score is 5 runs to tie here, and it's like, cool,
no
yes,
pressure.
obviously, but then it's like, yeah, now it's instead of just focusing on getting a couple back or 1, you're like, 5, like that's, even if we hit a grand slam, you only get 4 out of that. So it's really trying to piece together these smaller steps, break these down into smaller steps, break them into smaller things to accomplish. But the first thing you have to do is figure out why your brain's being negative. Obviously, like we said at the start, we're hardwired that way.
It's the way we are. Yep.
Yeah. But the next important piece that you have to do is, what is it? Am I putting too much pressure on myself? Am I super nervous? Am I just being straight up negative?
Yeah.
Am I kind of running through all these different hypothetical situations in my head? Am I not even thinking? Am I not even in the present moment? Am I thinking, gosh, am I going to have time to do my homework after this? Or can we stop at Chick-fil-A? Can we stop and get food on the bus ride back or something? What are my parents thinking about how I'm playing right now? What are my coaches thinking? Am I going to get benched?
Yep.
Yeah, those are the statements I usually say to them, because it really throws a monkey wrench into the whole activity for a second, which is kind of funny. I think it's kind of, it's like, I wonder what my parents are going to say if I win. And then they're like, oh, like my parents, I shouldn't really care what my parents think. And I was like, well, you sort of should, right?
Yeah.
You care about what your parents think of you, because they're important part of this, they're a key stakeholder in our sporting experience. But it's the fact that, you just need to stay present focused. Like I have to focus on the game. Who cares about what my parents are thinking, right? But it's because I need to focus on the game. When we say things like, don't make mistakes now, or something I used to say a lot playing tennis, don't double fault right here. So I'm about to hit a second serve. Great instruction, right? Like I shouldn't double fault. I'm going to lose a point. But in my head, what I'm thinking in that moment, right? If you think don't double fault right here, all I'm thinking about is I'm going to hit it wide out into the net every possible way I could double fault and mess up.
Yeah. I had some go-tos with that too. My favorite ones when I was pitching, don't hit the batter. Don't know why I thought that. Don't know why, but that was the main thing. Every so often, don't hit the batter, don't hit the batter. 9 times out of 10, that next pitch, I was drilling the batter with it, right? Or one of the ones that a lot of my athletes have related to, no matter what sport you play, it's like you can think about the fact if you've ever been on a golf course, there's a hole with water. Your brain immediately, don't hit it in the water, don't hit it in the water. You're probably going to hit it on the water because that's what you're focusing on. Yeah. So,
but we're giving ourselves great feedback and instruction in a way, but it's not framed positively, it's framed negative. So you have to figure out, why the heck am I saying this right now in this moment? And then change it to be positive. And what I've noticed doing this activity where I just like have them, I give them the statement, and I was like, they can usually instantly, my attempt at a snap right there, figure out why it's negative. It's instantaneous almost most times, so they can piece it together. And then when I ask them, all right, change it, reframe it to be positive without just regurgitating the words in the sentence, right? Like attack the issue, right? The issue is too much pressure. The issue is not staying present focused.
Yeah.
And it's like crickets, it's silence.
Yeah, it sounds scary.
Like this. Scary. And then it's like, all right, well, like how could we approach this? What do you think? It's like this. And it's like, yeah, that's maybe one of those more like how you like to call them back pocket statements. Like you just say, I got this. You could say I got this for every single one, but it's that thing like, sorry, it just brushes right off.
Exactly.
So I think that's the biggest thing is like attack the issue, right? Stay in the present moments, focus on, the next pitch, 1 point at a time, all these different things you could say to yourself. Pressure is a privilege. I love coming through in the clutch, things like that, right? But I think the biggest message I always try to say to them when we do this kind of exercise and activity is you really need to focus on what you need to do instead of what you don't need to do.
Yeah,
and it sounds really complex, but it's super simple. It's like what we just said, don't double fault. All right, what does that actually mean? Like, what do I actually need to do? I need to make my second serve. I need to hit it here, like you said, add that instructional or technical piece.
Yeah, I need to throw a strike, hit my spot, right? The thing that we actually want to happen is what we want to think about. And one of the ways that I dive into that with my athletes too is then coming up with our cues for that situation, right? So that way we're prepared. We know that we tend to think this way. We tend to think about what we don't want to do and we think that it's helpful. So let's have our cues ready to go in our back pocket of what do I want to think in this moment. So I've been working through that a lot with some of my softball pitchers of, okay, you're throwing a curve. What is your cue, right? Whether that's like follow through, spin it, like the one simplest thing that you need to do to throw that pitch, that's going to be our cue for it. So we have one for the curve, one for the change, one for the rise, like any situation that you're going to get into, let's come up with a cue that is the simplest, most basic way to think about it. That's going to allow us to focus on the right thing and what we actually want to happen. So,
and then we go through and it's just why are we trying to do this? And if you're out there listening, I guess, and you're really trying to think through how can I'll start doing this in games. This is part of the problem, I think, with this. The hard part with this, the trouble with this is it actually starts in practice. If you don't take care of this stuff, if you're not working on that self-talk in practice, it's not going to translate and carry through in games. Yeah. The other thing that you may notice, and as former coaches and instructors of the sports that we taught and played and still kind of teach also, is we as coaches give you both types of instruction. Like I'll tell you don't double fall right here, but I'll also tell you how to do it. I'll tell you what to do and what not to do because that's how we have learned the sport. And we do that at practice and you can get really technical and break that stuff down and that's what you need. But then when we get into the game, we think of just the negative things. That's what we remember. Because once again, it's all the hard wiring up here that we need to try to adjust and fix. And that's why it's a two-step process, really. I think, at least, when we work with an athlete or I work with an athlete, it's why is this negative? If you just try to be positive, it might not work. It might brush off. But why is it negative? And then, right, what's the issue? And then why are we changing that to be positive? Because that will be the most effective way for you to start, I think, fixing your self-talk. If you can be straight up positive, be straight up positive.
Good for you.
It's necessary. It's important, but. I've tried it. I try to try the stuff that I give out to the athletes in the sessions. Now I was like, I know this really works. Like it's I feel like an infomercial or commercial. I've tried it and it's worked for me. I try to like write out index cards. I try to say the like affirmation statements in the morning.
Look at you.
Didn't work. Yeah.
Oh. You gotta have more practice.
More practice, but like that's where. It could be like, we're just going to, you can sit in a session with an athlete and be like, we're just going to list 30 positive affirmations right now.
They would love that.
It's like drop and give me 30,
Yeah. Drop and give me 30 affirmations.
But I think that's, for me at least, what I've seen is the more effective way of doing it. And then when we get into our other topics that we talk about or future sessions, I'll be like that Leonardo DiCaprio meme sitting on the couch and it's like, oh, negative, change it.
Yeah, a lot of just,
fix it.
Hold up. And they'll start to pick up on that too. They'll start to correct themselves, which is really cool to see.
It is without them seeing it. I try not to point it out as much now, but I just have like a huge smile on my face.
It's like, okay, we did something.
Yeah, it's like it finally worked.
Yes. But going back to your point about practice and making sure that we're using these skills and these strategies in practice, I think that's a really important point to emphasize is that we're not just going to go into a game and be able to be super positive when there's more pressure, when we might be more worried about making mistakes, when there's more on the line. So being able to start to recognize that in practice is really important so that way it'll translate. But I think another way of looking at that is something that we work on a lot throughout our time together with our athletes is the practice versus performance mindset, right? So our practice mindset, it's probably going to be a little bit more negative, sometimes a little bit more critical, I think is a better word, because that's where we want to make changes and make improvements, right? We can be a little bit more critical in practice because that's the time to do it.
You should be.
Yeah, you should be, right? That's how you're going to improve and get better, is by actually thinking about what you're doing and having intent behind it and correcting form, technique, whatever it is. But also then recognizing the positives from practice, right? So we know what we needed to fix. We came up with a positive, and now we can stick with the positive while we're in the performance, right? That's the thing that we're going to carry on with us. That's going to allow us to find flow or get in the zone and just kind of trust in our training, because we know that we've put the time and effort into this in practice. So that can sometimes help differentiate between those negative thoughts from practice to game, is just preparing for it. I don't know if that made sense, but
it did.
Okay.
Yeah, right. We're going to work on these things, right? Like we said, we're coaches. We taught in practices. We teach you what to do and what not to do. And I need you to correct the things for me a little bit sometimes too. And I tried to have gotten better, try to get better at that in my own coaching, where it's like I'll try not to say like, all right, don't do that, but I'll be like, what am I actually trying to say? Like, do this instead. But it's also important as an athlete, for you to kind of start working on that in practice, because it will come up in games. And we're not telling you you're going to be 100% positive in games, right? We're telling you that this stuff's going to come up. Can you change it? Can you recognize it's negative? Can you recognize the issue and then change it to be positive? And also, maybe you just don't need to be positive. Maybe it's neutral. Maybe it's instructional. Maybe it's technical. You don't need to kind of have it be these kind of, as we kind of think a lot of things, it's like very black and white. It's not like positive or negative. There's a whole kind of spectrum and middle ground of different types of self-talk that exist out there.
Yeah, lots of different ways to go with it. Another strategy that I was, or that I started to use more recently, I got it from one of the Justin Sua podcasts, which are also little great clips.
Shout out.
Yeah, shout out Justin Sua if you're watching. But it's just like preparing for all of those thoughts that we're going to have, right? So it's something that he's done with his athletes and I've started with doing with mine, is write down all of the negative thoughts that you are going to expect to come up in a game, right? Some of the things that you've thought before that your brain tends to go towards, let's write them all down and acknowledge them. And then, like you said, kind of dig into it of like, okay, why is this negative? Why are we thinking about it? And then once we get into the game, we can kind of have the attitude of like, oh, I was expecting this. Like, I knew that this thought was going to come up, but I've put the time into debunking it or into reframing it. So it's not going to impact me like crazy in a game because I've prepared for it. I was ready for it. And now I can just acknowledge it without analyzing it or without taking it on in a game, because I've already done that. And now it's just a thought. It's not something that I need to sit with or let impact me in the way that I'm playing.
Right. And that's what we want to be as high performers. You want to be able to solve the problems and the issues that may arise, the negativity that's going to come up when we are out there competing. Because it's not always going to be, sunshine and rainbows, as we might think. Which gets, I think, to maybe a cool point of this discussion possibly that just popped into my head. So I'm
excited. Okay.
Social media, right? And using that to kind of it can be a tool. Obviously, a lot of it's maybe usually not a tool though. And I think that's something where, you could really start adding these negative pressure, negative thoughts by maybe you're watching all these clips, or maybe you're seeing other people, or even if you're watching film, right? And we need to try to possibly, right, think about in your own routines, minimizing the amount maybe that you're on social media before a game day. As much as everyone, I'm sure, loves to doom scroll, even myself included. But, obviously when we try to work on our mental performance or mental health, everyone knows you don't go towards social media. You try to go away towards it. So something to consider, right? Because that can just really get you negative on yourself and kind of beat yourself up. And
the comparison, the spiral, everything that comes with it.
Yeah, if you're watching the team you're about to go up and they just, crush this team and demolish them, and you're like, oh, we have to play them and all this stuff, or just other clips of other people and teams, because our feeds are catered towards us. So your sport, I guarantee you, is probably on your feed, and it's on there in positive, probably funny ways, cool ways you can learn, but also sometimes also in those negative ways.
Yeah, and I think we don't realize that it's negative a lot of the time too. It's like, oh, this looks cool, but then it's creating those expectations and those pressures that we're carrying with us without even really realizing it. We just think that that's normal, or that was, I don't know, just a standard that's maybe not super realistic.
Yeah. So
Yeah, it's a good point. I like that.
yeah,
like that.
always got to tie it in.
Yeah, very nice.
Thought of it on the spot here,
Yes. But I think just kind of circling back to just in general, some negative thoughts and pressures that we put on ourselves, changing the way that we're perceiving the situation, right? If we're putting a lot of pressure on ourselves for a game, for an at-bat, for a set, whatever it is, changing the way that we're perceiving it from a threat, from something that's scary to a challenge, right?
Yeah.
Taking it on as something that we can handle, that we're prepared for, that we're ready to fight and grow through.
Yeah.
So that's an easy way that we can kind of switch that mindset with that, and then focusing on the controllables, right? Instead of feeling all this outside pressure, expectations, negativity, okay, what can I actually control in this moment? Let's focus on those things. And what's the other one? Trust. Trust is
big trust.
Trust is another big part of that, right? Is just when we're falling into that negative spiral, like, what is the evidence that I have on the work that I've put in? Right? We're calling back to all the reps, all the time, all the practice, and everything that you've done to prepare for that moment, and leaning into that instead of all the uncertainty and all the negativity. It's just, I know that I've done everything I can to prepare for this moment. I'm going to trust in myself and my body that I know what to do, how to do it, and I'll do the best that I can in that situation.
Yeah. And I also think, too, a cool point when you just said trust, it made me, just listen to my own podcast. So shout out to Graham Betcharg. This is from him. He calls it, sometimes we might not have that trust in ourselves or body. It's just that like off or bad kind of performance day. I kind of call it my like 10-80-10 philosophy that I got from one of my old coaches and mentors. It's like 10% of the time, we took a 10-game sample, like 10% of the time, you're going to have those 1 to 2 really great performances. And you may know why, you may not know why. You had a great week of practice, or you just are having that on day. And then you have the 80%, the middle, those middle 6 to 8, where it could kind of fluctuate either way. And you have the other 10% where it's like really bad.
Yeah.
And sometimes, no matter what, I mean, if you try all these things that we're maybe saying, the biggest thing is, we are our CEO, our, chief energy officer, conscientious energy officer, right? The vibes, how we come off to other people, but trusting in your teammates and relying sometimes on other people maybe to pick you up, right?
Yeah.
It's not something maybe in your control, but if you're a leader, if you're a captain, if you're having a bad day, right? How can you still make sure that that's not rubbing off onto the other people, getting into the dugout, getting into the locker room, and kind of still, being uplifting when maybe you're not having your best day, because otherwise the vibe can change rather quickly.
It's contagious.
Yeah. So trusting in your teammates sometimes, relying on those teammates, relying on those other support systems that you have, whoever they may be, coaches, family, friends, families, parents, things like that too.
Yeah. Lean on the people around you, or even if maybe they're not there or you're not ready to go like talk to them about whatever's going on in your head, think about what they would tell you, right? I'm having a really bad day. Like, what would coach tell me? What would my best friend, like that I used to play with, tell me? Like, just kind of stepping outside of the situation a little bit and just changing the perspective in that way can be really helpful too.
Yeah. And I think that's a really cool piece with like just self-talk and reframing this. And something we maybe haven't talked about is like the tone and the dialogue we have with ourselves. You want it to be very, informal, very familiar. You don't want it to be, how you talk to your teachers versus how you talk to your parents versus your best friends versus your grandparents versus your cousins. Those are all very different ways you approach and go into all those conversations and think and talk about them if you've never thought about it like that before, right? We approach them all very differently, respectfully, disrespectfully sometimes, right? And when we talk to ourselves, we want the dialogue to be very informal and very familiar, because that way it's more comforting to us, and it's going to get us out of there a lot faster than if we're like, all right, how should I approach this in a really positive, formal way? It doesn't really work very well.
Yeah, that's just going to be confusing and one of those things that's not very believable that we just kind of brush off.
Yeah,
so
very chaotic.
Yeah, you're in control of it, which is pretty cool.
You are in control of your self-talk. Yeah, something that I should start remembering when I do my control circles activity. Yeah.
Oh, there you go. Add that one in there.
Got to add that one in there. You can control your self-talk. You can control what you're saying to yourself. Maybe not the inputs that are coming in, right? Because you have 30,000 of them, but trying to at least control the outputs.
Yeah, recognize them. Yeah, that's why, like, going off of like that first session when we first jump into self-talk, I love checking back in on it like the next time that I see athletes, because once we start to have this conversation and realize that, oh, we do have like this internal dialogue, we do have these thoughts throughout the day, we're going to start to recognize them a lot more. And then we'll start to pick up on the trends or how it changes or what we tend to say to ourselves more regularly. So once we can start to recognize that, it's really fun to see what athletes come up with from there, because usually at first it's like, I don't know, like I can't think of like what I'm saying to myself, but I could guarantee you once you start to recognize it, you're going to pick up on a lot, which is always fun to see.
It's cool too when I like start getting into goal setting with the athletes I work with. And I was like, we're going to write them out. And then I was like, change it, negative, really good here, positive, really good, right? And that's the tough thing with ourselves too. And like go through this, I was like, gosh, I just told you that needs to be fixed, that needs to be fixed, that needs to be fixed. But what am I saying that's good, right? Because that's hard for me at least to do. But I think that's the really cool piece, and something I want to just remember to touch on from your former points was the whole like challenge versus threat appraisal type of thing. And I kind of like to call it this idea of like a chasing versus a creating type of mindset.
Nice.
When we're chasing, we're kind of relying on those survival instincts. We're just out there and we have that tunnel vision focus, and we're perceiving things incorrectly, as Davey the dog in the background is snoring.
He's having a real good nap back there.
But when you're chasing, you're relying on survival instincts. You're just going, you're doing, which may be a good thing, but
autopilot
for me,
sometimes.
It's autopilot. Right. And we want to get you to that creating mindset where you're creating things, you're creating chances, you're doing all the right things. And that's the way I kind of like to kind of look at it, from like this whole challenge versus threat kind of appraisal things. Is like, are you chasing? Are you creating? Right. And there's benefits to both. I think that's a really cool piece. Sometimes we need to chase, right? We want to be the top. We're trying to chase.
Lock in.
And maybe when you're in the top, then you can create more, or you need to create chances to get to the top somehow. So.
Yeah, I like that. It's a good way of looking at that. Okay. Yeah. Cool. I think my final point that I just remembered that I wanted to make on this too.
It's going to be a lot of final points.
I know, lots of final points, but we're making it through. It's just the two of us. We're doing great. But it's just, once we recognize those thoughts, finding the evidence and finding the proof, right? So, okay, I'm having this thought. What proof do I have that makes this real? Probably not much, right? There's probably not a lot there. If there is, let's figure it out and figure out maybe how we can fix it. Or like, what proof do we have that this is false, right? I'm thinking that I'm not prepared, I'm not ready for this game. Let's think about all the training, everything that we've done to get ready, and just kind of like disproving those negative thoughts that we are having, so that way we can actually kind of work through them a little bit more too. So yeah, sweet.
Here's my final thought for today on this topic of reframing and negative pressures. I didn't say the last one was my final, I don't think. If I did, we'll check the record. But it's really, and I already said it, but just to reiterate it, right? The biggest thing that I think you can get out of this whole piece of reframing is focus on what to do instead of what not to do, right? Don't focus on what not to do, focus on what to do. It's a very tough kind of challenge to get to there. But if you do, the rewards, the rewards, maybe we didn't need the water. The rewards are going to be kind of almost limitless. Like, you know what to do. It's great that you worked on what not to do in practice, not having your, certain technique or form be a certain way. But when you can really focus on what to do, instead of thinking, don't double fault, don't strike out, don't hit the batter, don't hit what's the thing on the hockey net called? The post.
There you
That's
go.
the one.
You're
don't
learning.
hit the post.
Do you ever use don't think about a pink elephant? Yeah, that's one of my favorite ones with the athletes, because instantly,
you already made your final point.
Big smile. Sorry, that's all I had to say on that.
No, it is the same thing though, right? When we said that before, like, don't go out you don't hit the batter, don't double fall. It's like, don't think of a pink elephant, don't think of a fluffy pink elephant, don't think of a whatever it could be. Picture horn, here's a who, whatever it might be, right? That's what that is, right? We just start thinking towards that. So instead of thinking unsuccessful outcomes, right, try to think towards the more successful outcome that you're looking for, what to do. So I think that's my big final point.
I think that's a great way to wrap it up.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you guys for listening. Hopefully you're able to bear through that episode with just the two of us.
It's a great episode. And if you have questions, comments, thoughts, concerns, drop a comment, follow, like, and get ready for the next episode with us too.
We'll be back.
If you like what you're listening to, be sure to follow the Athlete Cafe on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. You can find us wherever you enjoy listening to your podcasts.